It started 10 years ago with a friend who got me into apple cider vinegar, because before that I didn't know about it. 10 years ago, if you asked me the difference between apple cider vinegar and spirit vinegar, I'd be surprised there was any. He showed me his vinegars. I tested them on myself for almost a year, and honestly, I said, wow, I feel better. My waist measurements went down a bit. Everything is positive. I started to look into it more closely, and the only thing missing in my friend's vinegars was that they weren't organic. Because unfortunately, nowadays, huge amounts of pesticides are used in orcharding. So we actually talked about it at the company, thought it over, and 10 years ago, we produced our first vinegar from pure apple juice, without adding water or sugar, of course, from organic apples. So our vinegar is fully biocertified. However, we've only been selling it on a full scale for 3 years now, because before it goes on sale, it has to age for at least 5 years. So it's a vinegar that's been through a lot, but I hope today I'll convince you to make this kind of vinegar yourself and also put it away in the cellar, because time passes. And the fact that we'll have a vintage 2025 in the cellar, and it'll be the year 2033, that's really going to be a cool curiosity. I'll grab a nice vintage from the cellar.
See, people talk about wine vintages, and you're talking about vinegar vintages. So tell me, Zbyszek, does it matter that it sits for so long? What does it do for the vinegar to be aged like that? What changes in it? What qualities does it gain?
Flavor qualities. It's simply a real treat. I'm going to use a not so great comparison here, because when I was younger, I used to drink what we called stick-written wines. You know, wines like Igris, the kind you get for 7 zlotys at the store, and of course you can call them wines, they have some alcohol in them. When I grew up and started earning a bit, I also tried those wines that cost much more, a few hundred zlotys per bottle. Well, here it's wine and there it's wine, but the difference is huge. What's the deal with this vinegar? If you make vinegar, or I do, or you viewers, we have a lot of recipes from the internet, and they all have one thing in common. We take some apple scraps, pour water over them, add sugar or honey, some kind of sugar, and let nature do its work. First, alcoholic fermentation occurs, which is why we added water and sugar to produce more alcohol, because alcohol will suppress things like mold. Next, once the alcohol is there, once the bacteria have consumed all the sugar, then the acetic acid bacteria start to work, and they convert the alcohol into acetic acids, which are so important for us, and we'll talk about that later. However, if this vinegar quickly goes from the company, because today, even if organic apples arrive at the factory in the morning, by the evening the vinegar is already leaving the factory, then a side effect is that there's still quite a lot of alcohol left in it. And now, if I want to help my body, because for example, I find out from Natalia or Zbyszek that apple cider vinegar can quickly relieve my heartburn. Wait, we can't use such words, so let's say remove such heartburn from our body. Suddenly the alcohol that's in this vinegar can irritate my sores, it can irritate any wounds, and that's a side effect I don't want. That's why when I age it for a long time, all the alcohol naturally breaks down and there isn't even a homeopathic amount left. So if my esophagus is now one big wound, if there are a lot of ulcers or other things in my stomach where the lining is damaged, then by not giving alcohol, I'm not able to cause any further aggravation of the wound. And most importantly, I avoid issues related to pain. To put it simply, like if a child cuts their hand and the mother mixes up a bottle of hydrogen peroxide with a bottle of salicylic spirit, it will turn out to sting a lot. The same goes for vinegar, which is why it's so important for vinegar to age as long as possible and to add as little sugar to it as possible. because the sugar that's naturally in the fruit is also enough to make alcohol, and the bacteria will feed on it enough to produce acetic acid. However, an important thing is that if I don't use this sugar, then I have to be a bit more precise. Being more precise means that I have to wash the apples, I have to thoroughly scald the juicer, scald the jar, because it's very easy for mold to get in, and then I'll ruin what I worked so hard to prepare myself. So it's harder to make vinegar from just juice, but it's easier with water and sugar. But when it comes to the quality, it's just like comparing cheap wine to an exclusive one that's several decades old.